Well, hello, everybody. My name is Mark Chussil. I'm with the Department of Strategy at the Boston Graduate School of Business. Thank you so much for being here with me today to talk about strategy. Now, the way that our webinar is going to work, we'll go for roughly 30 minutes. We will take questions at the end. There is a panel that you should be seeing on your screen that allows you to type in questions. We'll take those at the end of the presentation. And your microphones are muted so that we don't have any distracting audio going on. So thank you again for being here. This is really going to be fun. I'm especially delighted that we have people from pretty much around the world who have called in for this webinar. So just a little bit about me and who you are listening to. I have been in the field of competitive strategy for about 35 years. I've spent most of that time in consulting, spent some time in industry and high tech, and some time in teaching. In the what I've done is to conduct a couple hundred business war games for Fortune 500 companies and at conferences and universities on 6 continents. I've analyzed something like 700 case studies of businesses when I was getting my MBA at the Harvard Business School. I've looked at and analyzed over thousands of businesses when I was at the Strategic Planning Institute with a database that they had there. And I've analyzed literally millions of simulations using my own technology. Now, I say these things not to give you some idea of miles or years, but rather to convey the idea that I have seen a lot in strategy. And that's what I'm going to be bringing to the course on strategy at the Boston Graduate School of Business, and also what we'll be dealing with in our 30 minutes here, which will be sort of like a miniature course in strategy. The things that I've seen, the things that I've learned, have helped companies to make or save billions of dollars. So we know that this stuff works. Now, when we talk about strategy, there's a couple of metaphors that people tend to use. One of them is chess and the other one is war. Now, both of those are pretty good metaphors. They have the idea of competition, idea of complexity, the idea that you need intellect, not just force, to make things happen. On the other hand, even though they are good metaphors in those senses that they are that they require so much intellect, they also are not good enough for the metaphors that we need. And the reason that they're not good enough is that they tend to have just one opponent, certainly in chess and often in war, there's just one opponent. The concept of customer is completely lacking in both of those metaphors. And even though, and the idea of how you win is different in chess and in war. The only way that you win is for the other guy to lose. In business, those things are not the case. In business, there are multiple parties involved. It's not just you and not just the competition, but there's customers, there's employees, there's government regulatory agencies, and many others. There are multiple measures of success that are going on. Could be anything from profits to your stock price to the satisfaction of your employees to bringing interesting and valuable new things to customers, to making a difference in the community and providing jobs. All of those things are measures of success. And one thing that is important that is really different from chess or war is that in business, the game may never end. So all of those things make strategy even more complicated than chess or war, and for that matter, even more fascinating than those things. Now, you may be called in for this webinar for a variety of different reasons. You may be a potential student who is taking a look at the course, wants to find out what are the things that you're going to learn that will make you a superstar strategist. You may be an employer. You want to figure out, if we sponsor some people to come in for this course, what are the things that they are going to learn that are going to help them help us make better decisions in our company? You may be a recruiter, so you may want to find out what it is that happens in the strategy course so that will make the people who have gone through it that much more valuable for you to recruit. And you may just be somebody who wants to peek in and take a look at what's going on in the world of strategy, maybe get some useful ideas and get some thought-provoking ideas that you can use right away. So whoever you are and whatever the reason is that you're here, we say welcome. Now we're going to be focusing on the idea of thinking, which of course is what schools help us to learn. That's the whole point of schools. They help us to think. In strategy, the ability to think well is the most important skill that you can have, because thinking well leads directly to better decisions, and that's what we need to do in strategy. So we're going to start off here with a case study. This is from a real business case. It's from a business war game that I conducted. I will not reveal the name of the company for confidentiality reasons. I will say that it is a Fortune 500 company, and at least if you're in the United States, I guarantee that you have heard of this company. But we're not going to reveal the name of them. So here's the situation. They were very, very strong in their market. They had pretty close to a monopoly. And then they found out that a new competitor was going to come in. This new competitor had already entered several other markets and was therefore very credible. The new competitor, each time they had entered a market, had always come in with a low price strategy. They wanted to undercut whoever was there in the market already. So the people in this company figured, well, we need to know how are we going to deal with this new competitor when they come into our market. They came up with two strategy options, and they couldn't figure out which one they should choose. Now, as I'm describing them, I would like for you to think about how would you make the decision and which of them would you choose. In fact, I will encourage you to write down your answer. So here's the two strategies they came up with. One was what they called live and let live. This strategy said, this new competitor is coming into our market, nothing we can do to stop them. They're going to come in at a low price, highly, highly likely. We don't want to trash the market for ourselves, so we'll compete, of course, but we're not going to try to go head-to-head with them. And we'll live and let live. They'll take their part of the market, we'll take our part of the market, and we will continue to be successful and profitable. There were other people in the company who said, we want a strategy that we call all-out war. And this strategy was designed to say, we're not going to give up a single customer more than we actually have to. We want to retain as much of our business as possible. And if they're going to come in with a price-oriented strategy, well, that's what we'll do too. We're going to make it as difficult as possible for them. So those were the two possible strategies. We business war gamed those two things. And we'll come back to that case at the end, and I'll tell you what it is that happened. But I would urge you, think now about how would you decide and what would you decide. Here we have a whole bunch of companies that over roughly the last 10 years have gone bankrupt. These companies are remarkable for a couple of reasons. One is that they were very large companies, large, well-respected, well-established. Some of them had been around for a long time. Like you see that one from Lehman Brothers near the center, sort of down to the left. They had been around for over 150 years, and they went bankrupt. So what's the common thing among all of these companies is that none of them wanted to go bankrupt, and yet they did. In a few cases, bankruptcy happened very quickly, but in most of the cases, the bankruptcy happened over a long period of time. In some cases, it happened over decades. So why did this happen? This surely is not what they intended to do. Nobody says our strategy is to go bankrupt. Let's ask ourselves an even deeper question than that. Why do smart strategists choose bad strategies? Again, nobody wants to choose a bad strategy. And we can figure that a strategy that leads to bankruptcy is probably a bad one. Bad strategies also include those that lead to us failing to hit our performance targets, or that lead to people being fired because the performance wasn't good enough, or that just lead to disappointment. So why does this happen? Now, we certainly are presented with many possible explanations for why smart strategists choose bad strategies. Things like we have too much of a short-term focus, or it's because of the economy, or because of unions, or because of government regulation, or because of fickle customer. I mean, pick whatever you want. There's dozens of explanations that people have come up with to answer this question. I would like to suggest that there is an answer to this question that is much simpler than those. It may not be the entire answer, but it also may be. And it is something that is so simple that we tend not to look at it, but I have found it to be a profoundly useful answer. And that is this. The reason that smart strategists choose bad strategies is that they think they're good strategies. Nobody says, well, let's see, I've got an option to take a bad strategy or a good strategy. I think I'll take the bad one. Nobody does that. We take bad strategies because we think they're good ones, and we're wrong. That's the problem, or that is at least a problem, possibly the problem. Let's illustrate. So here we have our typical cartoon strategist. And this person has come up with a strategy and wants to know, will my strategy work? In this case, the cartoon strategist is looking at a spreadsheet, which you can see in that little thought bubble. And it doesn't really matter that we're looking at a spreadsheet. It could just as easily be trend lines or forecasts or a consultant's report or anything at all. But in this case, we've chosen the idea of a spreadsheet. The important thing to notice there is that the person has chosen a way to look at the problem. In this case, a spreadsheet, although it could be anything else. That is an important decision that the person has made. So let's pursue this idea with the spreadsheet. Here we have a spreadsheet. I've made this up. This is not for any particular company, but it's probably going to, for those of you who have worked with spreadsheets, this is probably going to look very familiar. We have, what we have here is a year of history. We've got our estimate for 2011. We've got our forecast for the next few years. We have sales. We have expenses of various kinds. We have profits. We have a couple of cells at the top that let us put in our assumptions for sales growth and price growth. So my question for you is, what is wrong with this spreadsheet? If we're going to make the strategy decision and we want to know, will our strategy work, what is wrong with the spreadsheet? Now, if we were doing this in person, we would be having a vigorous and entertaining discussion about exactly what is going wrong here. Almost certainly somebody will bring up the point that we have, that the expense numbers are going up as a constant percentage of sales, and that's correct. It's wrong to do that because some of those expenses should not be changing as a constant percentage of sales, and we can fix that. That's not too difficult. So let's imagine that we have fixed that. And so that problem is removed. Now, what, if anything, is wrong with this spreadsheet? And if we were having our vigorous and entertaining discussion, what would eventually come out is a couple of things. First of all, this spreadsheet completely ignores the competition. There is no concept of competitor here. There's no line that says effect of a competitor's new product introduction or effect of a competitor's price change. It doesn't exist. In effect, what the spreadsheet does is it says competitors are going to do whatever it is that we want them to do. Or stated equivalently, it assumes our strategy will work. And that is a little circular because the question that we're asking is, will my strategy work? And yet the spreadsheet sort of presumes that. Second thing that's going on here is that there's no concept of customer. There's nothing in here that, there's no line that says effect on the customer of our price change. Oh, sorry, that's one we do have. Effect on the customer of an increase or a decrease in our product quality. There's no line here for effect on the customer of a customer loyalty program that we may put in place. So what we have assumed here is that the customer is going to behave in a particular way. That's where our assumed sales growth line comes in at the very top of the spreadsheet. So we have assumed away two of the most important things in strategy, namely the customer and the competitor. There's one other problem here, and it's a little subtle, but I think it's really interesting. Profit is defined as sales minus expenses. So what that means is if we want to increase our profit, how about if we cut our expenses? What if we take our advertising expense or our market research expense or our research and development expense? What if we cut them down to zero? What will the spreadsheet say? It will say that our profits go up. Well, according to accounting rules, that's true. But we know that that's not right. If we were to cut those things down to zero, we're going to be hurting our business. The problem is that most spreadsheets don't take that kind of thing into account. And so it gives us the impression that by cutting, our profit will keep going up, up, up. Now, we know that no sane manager will say, let's completely cut those things out. But what if we cut them by 50%? What if we cut them by 20%? How about 10%? Surely we can cut 10% from any of those things. Well, maybe not. But the point here is that the tool invisibly tilts us, biases us in favor of a particular way of thinking, which in this case is cutting costs. If we were to use other methods, there would be other kinds of biases built in. In this particular method, the accounting-based spreadsheet, that's what the biases are. So what we really should be doing is to say, will my strategy work? The thought bubble goes in the other direction. The computer is thinking like us. Who else is the computer going to think like? We tell the computer what to calculate. In this case, we've chosen a spreadsheet. It could have been trend lines, forecasts, or whatever. In this case, with a spreadsheet, the computer is thinking like, thinking the way that we tell it to using those accounting rules. The point here is that our choice of technology, our choice of tools, can have a major effect on the way that we think about strategy. And it's the result of a decision that we made, in other words, which tool to use, that we made even before we started to think about the strategy. Let's try something completely different. We're talking about a school, so in schools we have quizzes, so we've got a quiz. Here's today's quiz. There's 3 questions for you here, and I would like you, please, for each of these 3 questions to write down 2 numbers such that you are 90% sure that the right answer is in between those 2 numbers. So if you're unsure, put the numbers pretty far apart. If you are sure, put the numbers closer together. Now, don't be 100% sure. So on that second question, how many people escaped from American prisons in 2008? You could say it's somewhere between 0 and 310 million, which is roughly the population of the United States. If you put those numbers down, you would be pretty much 100% sure. So something a little bit narrower than that. So for each of those 3 questions, 2 numbers such that you're 90% sure that the right answer is in between them. And if we were doing this in person, this would also be vigorous and entertaining. And when I reveal the answers to you in just a second, there would be oohs and ahs about how remarkable it all is. So I'm going to imagine that you ooh and ah as I reveal the answers. This is what they are. So count yourself as correct on any of those questions if those numbers are in between the 2 numbers that you came up with. Now, because I've said 90% sure, that means that we should expect that 90% of the people here would have correctly answered any given question. I have done this many, many times in person with people in many countries. Literally thousands of managers have gone through this with different kinds of questions. And what happens is we never even get close to 90%. 50% is more like it. There have been questions where nobody has gotten it right. And I would imagine that that is the same thing that's going on here now. When I took a quiz like this, I did exactly the same thing. I ended up with pretty low marks on it. And it's fascinating because what this reveals about us is overconfidence. Even though I told you, if you don't know, put the numbers pretty far apart, we still tend not to put the numbers far apart enough. We think we know more than we do. And again, this is something everybody does. It's overconfidence. It's a characteristic of human beings. Now, on questions like this, it's no big deal. I doubt that anybody who's on this call will have their business materially affected by the answers to these questions. But here, you knew you didn't know. When we get to questions about your business and the future of your business and the strategy decisions that you need to make, you may think that you do know. Hey, I've been in this business for a long time. I'm the boss. I'm supposed to know. I'm an expert. That's why I'm here. I'm supposed to know. I've got all these reports and all this research. They all tell me what it's supposed to be. And so I believe that I know the answer. And when I believe I know the answer, how much am I willing to spend in time, money, or effort to find the right answer? Zero. Why should I? Why should I devote any time, money, or effort to it? I already know the answer. It would be wasteful. It would be even irresponsible for me to do that, for me to spend the time, money, or effort, because I already know the answer. But the problem is, if we are overconfident, then that can lead us to making seriously bad decisions. And if you look at some of the experiences that businesses have had, you will find strong evidence of overconfidence. So let's go back to our case study. Imagine the way that you were thinking about it before and how you would make that decision, and also what you decided for those two strategies. Think now about, we've just been talking for roughly 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less. Would you answer those questions differently? Now, here's what happened in this particular case. We ran, as I said before, we ran a war game in which we had some of the people from the company role-playing their business, some of the people role-playing their competitors' businesses. They made a series of decisions which we fed into a computer simulator, and the simulator told us what the likely performance would be. So first we war gamed and simulated strategy one, live and let live. And what we found was that the simulation said you're going to lose roughly 20 points of market share. When we told the company that, they went through the roof. They were saying, 20 points? That's way too much. We're not going to let them get away with that much. That's it's one thing to live and let live, but 20 points is just unacceptable. And everybody in the room was determined to go for all-out war as a result of that first analysis. And we said, well, okay, that's fine, but hey, as long as we're all here, how about if we war game the other strategy also, all-out war? And they said, sure, yeah, that would be a good and prudent thing for us to do. So we did. They role-played themselves, and they role-played the competitors. We took their decisions and simulated the results. And it turns out all-out war would cause them to lose 40 points, 40 points of market share, and about $500 million over the next few years. And at that point, you can imagine that everybody in the room switched back to live and let live, which is what they ended up adopting. Now, there's a couple of interesting points here. One is that they could have made the decision between those two strategies in a variety of different ways. They could have voted on it. The boss could have made a decision. They could have said, we're going to let senior management decide. But what they did was they ran a war game. Now, it's not important that it was a war game. What is important is that they chose a rigorous and thoughtful and insightful way to answer the question. And they ended up with a really good answer. The second thing to take away from it is that precision is completely it's unimportant in this case. Who cares if it's 20 points of share versus 40 points, or if it's 21 points versus 38, or if it's 17 versus 43. It doesn't matter. In the first place, you can't get much better precision anyway. In the second case, the decision is just so clear at that point that worrying about precision is not the key thing. So this was an exercise as much in decision making as in anything else. Yeah, you can tell my passion for this stuff, because I really get wrapped up in these cases, because it's just so interesting to see how people make decisions and how all of us, including those of us who are conducting these games, how all of us can be surprised and learn something new every time. So we're going to start to wrap up. The strategy decisions that we will be covering and that we'll be covering in the course and that we need to make in our lives as strategists can really fall into three kinds of categories. We deal with tools and technologies. What are the things that we work with to support us in the decisions that we make, to support us as strategists? There's strategy fundamentals, which have to do with the levers that we get to pull, the things that we measure, and so on. The third, which doesn't get spoken about very often, but we do here, is strategist fundamentals. This is you as a person. How do you think about strategy? What is your skill as a strategist? How can we improve those things? So in tools and technology, I'm not going to describe any of these things here. The main reason I wanted to put a lot of stuff on this slide was just to impress you with the breadth of things that we will be covering in the course. We will be covering all of these things and more in the course on strategy. These are all tools and technologies that are available for strategists to use. We started to talk about some of them before with spreadsheets and business war games. There's a bunch of other ones. Strategy fundamentals are the things like market share and speed of action, customer loyalty, and so on. These are things that we hear about a lot. These are the levers that we pull. These are the measures that we use. And these also are critical for any discussion about strategy. And finally, the strategist fundamentals are the things that we were touching on today with overconfidence as an example. And that's an example of bias. And there's much more there that goes into becoming a highly skilled strategist. So we mentioned before that thinking is the key focus of the course, because thinking well is the most important skill of a great strategist. Here's why thinking is so important. What we want is success. Well, where does success come from? It comes from competitive advantage. Where does competitive advantage come from? It comes from the decisions that we make. Where the decisions we make come from? They come from the way that we think. And so the better we think, the better our decisions, and the more likely we are to achieve success. So we started off with a question about why do smart strategists choose bad strategies? What our objective is in the course and in strategy in general is to help smart strategists choose good strategies. That's what we're here for. And I want to conclude by saying to everybody, thank you very much for being here. Just a brief taste of the strategy course and some, I hope, thought-provoking and useful ideas about strategy. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in the box that you should be seeing on your screen. And we have a few minutes to answer those. And otherwise, we are done. And thank you very much.